This video is about how to find the Banzhaf Power Index, or BPI for short, in a weighted voting system. Firstly, the Banzhaf Power Index of each player is a way to compare power among the different players, basically to see who has more power than who. And before I get into it, I just want to make a little note here about how we write things. If I write BPI and then player 1 with a little 1 and subscript in parentheses, that means that we're finding the Banzhaf Power Index of player 1. So if I write BPI, then parentheses, piece of 1 equals sum, that means that that's the Banzhaf Power Index for player 1. Now BPI can either be a fraction or a percentage depending on what you like better. It doesn't really matter. So in order to find the BPI, there are 3 steps. Step 1 is you have to find all of the winning coalitions in this weighted voting system. Step 2 is you have to identify the critical players in each winning coalition. And step 3 is you have to set up the fraction like this. So the BPI of player 1, in the denominator at the bottom, we have the total number of critical players. And in the numerator, at the top, we have the number of times that player 1 is critical. So it's a formula, I guess. So the easiest way to do this is to just have an example. So here we go. I'm going to have a weighted voting system with 3 players. Quota is 7, player 1 has weight 5, player 2 has weight 4, player 3 has weight 2. So step 1 is to find all of the winning coalitions. So since I have 3 players, I know that, well, firstly, coalitions with weight 7 or larger are the winning coalitions. So since I have 3 players, I know that it is possible that I could have a 1-player coalition, 2-player coalition, or 3-player coalition. So I'm just going to list all of them. There are no 1-player coalitions that win, because no player has weight 7 or greater. That also means we have no dictators in this situation, so that's good. The 3-player coalition is also an easy one to check. It really should win, and 5 plus 4 plus 2 is 11, which is more than 7, so that's enough to win. So the 1-player and the 3-player coalition should be pretty easy to check on. So that leaves the 2-player coalitions. I'm just going to list all of them. We've got player 1, player 2, player 1, player 3, and player 2, player 3. So let's see which ones of these win. The weight of the coalition involving player 1 and player 2 is 9. 9 is bigger than 7, so that's enough. The weight of the coalition with player 1 and player 3 is 7. That's enough to win. And the weight of the coalition of player 2 and player 3 is 6. That's not enough to win, so since that's a losing coalition, I don't care about it. So here are my winning coalitions. I have the 2-player coalitions of player 1 and 2, and then the 2-player coalition player 1 and 3, and the coalition with everyone. So now I've identified my winning coalitions. So the next thing to do is to identify the critical players in each winning coalition. I'm going to do this kind of fast because there is a different video about identifying the critical players. So if you're confused by that, go back and check that video out. Alright, here we go. Player is critical if that coalition wins while that player is present, and loses if that player leaves. So I'm going to start with the first one on my list. The coalition involving player 1 and player 2 has weight 9. But if I remove player 1, it now has weight 4. 4 is not enough to win, so that means that player 1 is a critical player in this coalition. So once again, coalition with both of them has weight 9. If I remove player 2, now it has weight 5. That is not enough to win, so player 2 is also critical. Moving on to the next one, the coalition with player 1 and player 3 has weight 7. If I remove player 1, it now has weight 2, which is less than 7, so that's not enough to win. That means that player 1 is critical. If I remove player 3, now my coalition has weight 5. 5 is less than 7, so that's not enough to win, so that means that player 3 is also critical. And on to my last coalition, the 3-player coalition has weight 11. If I remove player 1, it now has weight 6. So that means that we need player 1 in order to win, so player 1 is critical. If I remove player 2, this coalition has weight 7 now. That is enough to win, so player 2 is not really necessary. So player 2 is not critical. And let's remove player 3. Without player 3, my coalition has weight 9. 9 is bigger than 7. That's enough to win, so player 3 is also not critical. So now I have all of my critical players. Now what I need to do is set up my fraction here. So remember, I'm looking for the BPI for player 1. That means on the top we'll have the number of times that player 1 is critical, and on the bottom we'll have the total number of critical players. So if you count, I can see that I have 5 critical players on my list. So I'm just going to change my fraction to have the denominator of 5. No matter which player you're finding the BPI of, in this situation, the denominator will always be 5. So now I need to count how many times is player 1 critical. So let's do that. So 1, 2, 3. Player 1 is critical 3 times. So that means that the BPI of player 1 is 3 out of 5. So that takes care of player 1. Let's move on to looking at player 2. Notice the denominator is still 5 because I haven't changed my list. Now I just need to count how many times is player 2 critical. And looks like just once. So the BPI of player 2 is 1 out of 5. And now let's look at player 3. Denominator is still 5. So I just need to count how many times is player 3 critical. And it looks like just once. So the BPI of player 3 is 1 out of 5. So now we found the BPI for each player. Now one thing that's kind of nice is you can sort of check your work. Here are the BPIs of all of the players I figured out. BPI of player 1 is 3/5, player 2 has BPI 1/5, and player 3 has BPI 1/5 as well. If I add those fractions together, I get 5 out of 5, or 1. That's supposed to happen. So your fractions are supposed to add up to 1 when you're all done. I had said earlier that you could convert these to percentages if you want to. I don't really care that much. But if we wanted to do 3/5 as a percentage, we would just do 3 divided by 5, which is 0.6, then multiply that by 100 to get 60%. Same thing for player 2, 1 divided by 5 is 0.2, multiply that by 100, we get 20%. And player 3 is the same as player 2. If you look at the percentages, 60 plus 20 plus 20 adds up to 100%, so we are on the right track. So that's how you find BPI. It has a lot of steps, but as long as you take it slow, then I think you'll be alright.